Dan, you want to take a seat? Or Dan, you want to come down and take a seat? Stand at the back kind of problem, I know. Okay, if I may have your attention, everyone, welcome. I'm Sivan. I'm part of the Jessica Huntley Community Garden, of which, of course, Eric Huntley is part of the project as well, and he's in our room. Can we have a round of applause for Eric Huntley, please? There's other respected and valued member of our wider political community here, from their teens up until elder ages, let's say. And I'm not going to mention all the names, but welcome everyone. It's really nice to see everyone here. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes just introducing the event. Welcome to West Ealing. Like probably every community in which we reside, this community is a largely migrant and working class community. It's a place of, as Eric always says, this place was a political desert before Eric and Jessica got active here. And we literally, from where Professor Gus and Comrade Claudia are sitting, can see the front entrance of the old Walter Bookshop, the Walter Rodney Bookshop on Chigwell Place, which closed in 1991. So I moved here as a 12-year-old in 1991. And so we launched the community garden in Jessica's name to give a visual evidence in our community that we still exist, we are still sowing seeds, we are still attempting to bloom and grow those seeds, actually and metaphorically. And in developing that metaphor, there's great forces at work who don't want us to even have the seeds, who don't want us to even attempt to try and lay them down, let alone germinate them and make them bloom. And that's called the Tories, and it's called white supremacy, and it's called colonialism and capitalism. So we are trying to beautify our community in the sense of what you've just seen in the libation ceremony that Professor Gus very kindly led, but also actually in trying to organize the grassroots here intergenerationally. And that's a considerable challenge before us that requires your support and participation in doing that. So this is a part of that process of grassroots mobilizing. So it's good to have a full room in the house. And also I'd like to give a big thanks to Josh and Ellie and everyone at the SET project who run this space, who now for the second time, the first time on the 1st of May, in the launch of the Jessica Huntley Community Garden, and now the second time, only 3 months later, have given this space to us for free. Please a round of applause. That's how solidarity works. Mutual solidarity, developing comradeship, developing struggle at the grassroots, with no other return than trying to organize the grassroots and the rewards from serving the people heart and soul. So today I'm just going to hand over. Before I do, there's an important campaign. You've probably all heard that another professor in our struggle, Hakim Adi, who's been at the forefront of his particular place and struggle in fighting for us in the white academic sphere. And I've got to big up Dr. Les as well in that regard as well, who's in the room with us. And as an old junglist, I have to say, also is known as Leslie Lyrics. Big up the reggae ragga jungle traditions. Hakim Adi is under attack. His course is under attack. It's the only course, if I'm not mistaken, about Africa and the diaspora anywhere in the world. And it's been threatened with total axing. You probably know about it. If you don't, we have documents to share with you. There's a petition online. It's a very important campaign for you to support. Today, I'm going to hand over to Claudia Tomlinson, who will be in conversation with Professor Gus. Claudia happens to be one of the graduates of Hakim's course, so that's an interesting connection in that regards as well. Thank you for everyone turning up, and please round of applause for Claudia Tomlinson and Professor Gus.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Is this mic okay?
Sorry.
introduce as well.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jessica, particularly for mentioning the campaign. As you know, as you've indicated, there is a very active campaign. It's now reached 12,000 signatures, and we really want to keep it going. It's a very important cause. Professor Addy is a very important academic and scholar and activist, and we really want to maintain momentum for the campaign. All right, and there are some posters, so you can actually grab one of those later on. All right, now to turn to the launch event of the incredible book Blazing Trails, authored by Professor Gus John. And just to start by thanking Professor Gus for the fantastic libation ceremony that we've all participated in. And that really helps to set the context for the book, the themes of the book, the idea and the figures that we're going to encounter this evening. So I want to start by thanking you, Professor Gus, for producing such an amazing book, and just to start by, in a way, building on the experience that we've just had. And you come from a very spiritual background, and some people here, some of the audience will know you very well and know your journey, but for others who don't know your journey, could you just tell us a bit about your background and how you got to be here today in terms of the book and the amazing human being before us?
Thank you, Claudia. This is enormously generous. Before I begin, let me thank you for consenting to join me in conversation this evening, and congratulate you as the first of Hakim Addy's cohort to actually achieve your PhD, which you did just as this.
Thank you. I achieved it just before the hammer fell, so thank you. Yes, so Gus, Professor Gus, over to you.
Okay, so who am I? Born in Grenada in the Eastern Caribbean in 1945. To parents, father totally illiterate, mother semi-literate, peasant farmers. My mother was very religious, and in my remarks I want to make a distinction between spirituality and religion. She was a Roman Catholic and a pillar of the Roman Catholic Church in our village. My father was the complete opposite. He thought all priests were charlatans and an obstacle to progress, particularly for the poor and dispossessed. Because he thought they promised manna in heaven when you get to heaven. And in the meantime, you should derive virtue from suffering on earth. I love that man. His politics shaped mine. He couldn't read and write, but he always had a transistor radio next to him. He was always following current affairs programs on some shortwave radio. He knew what was happening in practically every part of the world. And we talked a lot about those things. So that by the age of 6, I was running around Grenada with him and so many other of his comrades, burning down sugar plantations and plantation houses. If there is one thing in my life I'm proud of,
Go on.
is that at the age of 6, I was disrupting. Thankfully, that practice has not discontinued. Okay, so
Go on.
to put all of this into context, my mother made me become an altar boy and a Roman Catholic acolyte from the age of 6. That means that I listened to many very boring sermons week after week after week in church. I listened to white priests exhibiting the prejudices, particularly against African religion. Tomorrow in London, there'll be some people going to have an Oshu festival. When I was a boy, even as an acolyte, we in our village had to go around cleaning the rivers from the lakes up in the mountains all the way down to the sea for the annual Oshun festival. Oshun is the deity that governs lakes and rivers and so on. Her sister Yemoja governs the seas, and Mama Olokun is the deity that governs the deep oceans. And I well remember, it's imprinted in my memory, the day when, having gone and cleaned the rivers, and the women particularly put on their gele and their head wraps and their costumes, African costumes, to have Oshun Day. The priest, who was a Czechoslovakian refugee who joined the Dominican order, the English Roman Catholic Dominican order here in England, took some of us, altar boys and other boys from the village, on a trek. And we were trekking all the way from the village to the lake, Grandetang Lake, passing all of these lakes and basins that we'd cleaned for Oshun. And as we went along, he had a stick, a kind of walking stick, and he viciously destroyed all of the vessels with offerings that the villagers had made to Oshun the week before. He just smashed everything to smithereens, and then sat us down on the river stones and gave us a lecture about why all of that stuff was not Christian, was pandering to the devil, was backward and primitive, and all the rest of it. 1 week later, bright sunny day, a Sunday, a man from the estate way up in the hills ran to tell us in the village that the rivers were overflowing up, way up in the hills. We saw clouds up there, but there was no rain where we were. And that we should tell the people who were in the river bathing or washing clothes to leave and go to a place of safety. So some of us as young boys ran up towards the mountain, others ran down towards the sea, raising the alarm and telling people to get out of the water. One particular woman, a farmer, who she used to be a domestic servant for some people who ran an estate. She had been washing her clothes, and where the river divided, there were some stones, and she hung the clothes off on the stones to dry. She went across one tributary to gather her clothes, and before she could get back, this avalanche came and swept her away. The priest had a field day. His contention was that the storm, the flood, was caused because we had done the Oshu festival the week before. And the woman had been washed away because he had been warning villagers Sunday after Sunday that Sunday was not a day to go to the river and wash all this amount of clothes. He, in his opulence and his privilege and the rest of it, couldn't understand that if you're working on an estate from Monday to Friday, you go and you sell your produce in the market on a Saturday, the only time you have to wash your clothes is a Sunday. So people went to church, washed their clothes, went to church, then washed their clothes, then prepared for the week ahead. He refused. When we found the body of the woman 3 days later, caught in a thicket of bamboo along the way to the sea, he refused to bury the woman. I was 15 years old. And I told the villagers, never mind him, I will bury her. By that time, of course, I was up in the stars as far as acolytes were concerned. I was highly regarded. They thought I was bright. I used to run Bible classes and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't tell them to tell the priest to go to hell. I didn't go that far. But I said, never mind him. Because one of the other reasons why he wouldn't bury the woman is because he determined that she had been living in sin for 27 years. She and her husband had been together, both farmers, not married, with grown-up children, 27 years. And he decided, A, she had sinned by washing clothes on a Sunday. B, she had sinned for 27 years by being with a man that... And I conducted at 15 this massive funeral in the village. People came from all over the country. What is the point I'm making? The point I'm making is that there's very little connection made, particularly in the Caribbean and in Africa. There are more churches in Nigeria than there are schools, for Christ's sake. People do not make the connection between Christianity, imperialism, and colonialism, which is something that I had to work out for myself. Because the other part of the story is that when I finished on my A-levels and what have you, my father wanted me to become a medical doctor. My mother wanted me to become a priest. And she and the parish priest and all of those other godly people in the village and the country had their way. So I joined the seminary at the ridiculous age of 17 to train to be a Roman Catholic priest in Trinidad. Did theology there for 2.5 years and then came here to Oxford, to Blackfriars, where the Dominican order had its headquarters, and studied theology at Oxford, and within 3 years of doing that, I gave it all up and became a Marxist. The reason for that being, I could not come to terms with what the church was doing in Latin America, supporting the most vile tyrannical regimes, and what they continue to do in the Caribbean, but particularly what they were doing, being complicit with the apartheid regime in South Africa. So I made a decision that I could not justify any of that stuff as somebody whose eyes had been opened by the Dominicans themselves while doing theology in Oxford. So my Marxism did not displace my spirituality. And as I said, I had no time at all, then nor now, for organized religion. Obstacle to progress at an individual and collective level. And one of the reasons why, which is I think behind your question, one of the reasons why these people in this book, those 22, are there, and how I came to choose them, is because I had a life experience with many, but all of them actually. I mean, we were fellow travelers in the struggle for racial equality and social justice. But also because I believe that there is something spiritual about having an abhorrence for injustice, about wanting to destabilize systems of oppression and get rid of them altogether. And if you agree with me that there is a fundamental difference between spirituality and religion, you would understand when I say, and I get into trouble for saying it, particularly amongst my African colleagues, that as far as I'm concerned, human liberation trumps, probably not quite the root word, but you know what I mean, all other forms of liberation, whether it be African liberation, the liberation of women, of people of homosexual dispositions or whatever. Human liberation, for me, is the essence of what our purpose in life is. And that's because of what I was saying over there. We are mind, body, and spirit. Nature tends to wholeness and perfection. It is not given to anybody on earth to oppress other people or to abuse power in a manner that makes others less than they can be. That's what drives me as a person. That's why I kick ass.
Thank you very much, Professor. So I think from that response, we get a very clear sense of your journey, your history, and how you have arrived at this juncture. And what I would particularly pick up on from the information that you have just shared is the injustices that continue once people have died and passed on. So I think people who care about injustices very much focus on the injustices that people struggle against during their lifetime. So all range of inequalities. But as you said, as part of colonialism, the denial of a decent burial was part and parcel of the system, and we know that that was also experienced even in following the death of those who fought for Britain in armed forces. So I think that's fascinating, and we know from research that an important part of activism in the Caribbean and within African societies was the importance of burial societies, the organisation of local people, ordinary people, very often led by women. And Jessica Huntley's mother was an example of someone who led in British Guyana in the organisation of burial societies, and they played a really important role in ensuring that people could be buried, and it was organised so people just contributed what they could financially over a period of time, and so that they would have that comfort of knowing that by being in this society they would get a decent burial, because that was an anxiety that people who were subject to injustices, as well as the day-to-day injustices of just living, also had to worry about, what am I going to be buried, get a decent burial. So that's what I particularly took from what you were saying, Professor Gus. And so just to move on to the next part of the discussion, you kind of touched briefly on the incredible 22 figures that you have selected. So you indicated that you selected people who you had a particular bond with, in terms of, and people you journeyed with in the struggle against injustices. And I have, in terms of my research, I've selected 2 individuals who form a central part of my research, and I wanted to invite you to do 2 things. Firstly, to talk a bit about who those individuals were to you, they meant to you, and then just to read a passage about those individuals. And the 2 that I have chosen are Jessica Huntley and John LaRose. Okay, so that's quite a big ask, but yeah, yes please.
So I met John LaRose in 1966 when I was still studying theology. My parents lived down the way there in Acton. I got here in August of 1964, and by September I was already with the Dominicans in Oxford. So I didn't spend very much time with them, but I visited Acton pretty regularly. They knew the Huntleys. Elder Eric was an insurance salesman, and he came regularly to our house to collect premiums and whatever you call those things. My parents had a high regard for him and for Jessica. John played a major part in my life. And I think the one way of expressing that is to say that when he passed on in 2006, I was asked by his partner, Sarah White, and indeed by Michael, his son, and others, to conduct his funeral, which I did at one large black-led church in Wood Green. But that same year, 2007 by then, we had a memorial in tribute to him at the South Bank, an all-day affair, which ended in the evening with people doing various presentations and musical tributes and so on. My particular contribution to that event was a poem which I called Personal Testimony of a Comrade. And I want to share it with you. A few minutes. When at Blackfriars in the 1960s, I wrestled with the church in Latin America and South Africa, he was there, John arose. When I struggled with Marx, Kierkegaard, and Merleau-Ponty, he was there. When I tried to get my head around being and nothingness, he was there. When I morphed from friar to gravedigger, which I did for 18 months, he was there. When I would lose myself in New Beacon Books at his home at 2 Albert Road, he was there. When I walked down Minty Alley, he was there. And you would get in the next bits a play on the books that John and I discussed at the time. I was an avid reader. He guided my reading to a very large extent, and we spent hours talking about those books. C.L.R. James's Minty Alley was one of them. So when I walked down Minty Alley, he was there, and ventured into the Palace of the Peacock, he was there. When I searched for the Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison, he was there. When things fell apart and I was no longer at ease, he was there. When I met Yevgeny Yevtushenko, he was there. When I saluted the Black Jacobins, he was there. When I met Christopher Okigbo, he was there. And when I heard the man died, he was there. When the lawnmower won the fight and took half my foot as booty, he was there. I had an accident while being a gravedigger and lost half my foot to a lawnmower.